When we think about water stress, most everybody immediately just thinks about water scarcity. But what's kind of newly happening is water toxicity. 45% of US American tap water is toxic. We're currently at SkyH2O building the world's largest atmospheric water generating projects near Houston, the third largest city in America, because of water toxicity.
Hey, welcome back, Solar Warriors, to SunCast. I'm Nico, and I want to say welcome in to all of you who are discovering SunCast for the first time. I'm well aware that you're investing the only non-renewable resource you've got, and that is your time. I promise to take good care of it. Each and every week, I dig inside the minds of the leaders who are pioneering our clean energy transition to extract the nuggets of wisdom for you so that you can add them to whatever it is that you're doing. Add it to your decision matrix on how to get a job or how to build your own company. So thanks for tuning in. Today's entrepreneur is someone I've known for 2 decades, admired, and even worked with. Alexander von Welczek was the original co-founder of Solar Power Partners, one of the OG solar PPA providers in California. They helped me get my start back in my Blue Line Power days, my first ever solar company. And I've been able to follow along as Alexander and his team grew SPP, sold it to NRG. He moved on to do Clean Power Group and a number of other ventures before realizing, as he often says, that climate is a water problem and that there is no green without blue. To understand more about what those mean and how Alexander is innovating once again, pioneering a new technology, atmospheric water generation, Alexander's going to go into the nugget of an idea that led to a transformative, disruptive technology that they're finally bringing to market. I want to thank you for joining us here. You can check out more than 650 backlogged episodes of SunCast that are all evergreen. They are not one-time listens, and they're not lost in history. They are all relevant today, or most of them at least, and that's by intention. Because I believe that those who are on the front lines have something to share, and that you, through pattern matching, can improve your own approach to saving our planet. Hope that you'll do that by listening in today and to some of our other episodes. You can find them all at mysuncast.com and in the app you're listening to right now. But for now, let's get ready to tune up your skills, Solar Warrior, as we dig into another powerful conversation here on SunCast. I'm excited to introduce today's guest that I have known for literally my entire solar career. Someone that I have both admired and revered, someone who has been a pioneer in more than one sector. We'll talk a lot about that today, but Alex von Welczek has been quoted as saying there is no green without blue, and also that the climate crisis is a water crisis. Let's dig in a little deeper. Alex, welcome to SunCast at long last.
I'm really excited to be here, Nico. And we've known each other a long time. I recall very fondly us first meeting back in Monterey in the 2004 timeframe, where we were pioneers together in the distributed solar space. So very excited to see how your career has come along, and excited to tell you about what I'm doing these days.
Yeah, you're up to some really cool stuff. For those who are unfamiliar, we'll talk a bunch about sort of the journey that you've been on, exploring the evolution of your career. But one stop on that journey impacted my career quite distinctly, because Alex and his team at Solar Power Partners funded the first PPA in Monterey County, which I originated. And that project changed the way I viewed possibility, right? Like it opened up for me more than cash deals, and more than going to Rabobank or some other local bank and asking them to please help my customer out. So I'm really looking forward to digging into sort of how you think about the trends that our economy and our society need to be paying more attention to, and how they're going to affect not just one, meaning ours, but future generations. And I want to do a little bit of a reverse in terms of the order of things, because you're working on a really complex problem right now, and I don't think that we have it really in great context principally because most of us just think about energy. And as I said before, you have said to me, the climate crisis is about water. We've kind of got energy figured out. Could you explain at a 30,000 foot level, what is the problem that you saw when you first looked into water as an issue, and why did it capture your attention?
Firstly, there's no life without water. Kind of everything begins with water. Most everybody in the meantime is convinced that the world is undergoing a climate crisis.
Mm.
We're experiencing everyday climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And the climate crisis is really a water crisis. Climate change expresses itself through water in forms of drought, storms, and really disasters. Recently, a study's been done that basically says that water crisis has a potential economic impact of $58 trillion on value, on food security, and on sustainability. Like you mentioned, we've known each other for a while. I turned 60 this year. I spent around about 15 years working for Fortune 500 companies, mostly in very creative executive positions. So it was very rewarding. But in the approximately 2002 timeframe, I more or less got the environmental bug. I've always been kind of connected to nature and the environment, having grown up in a more or less a coastal area of California. What was particularly impactful for me was, if you recall, in the early days, Al Gore, his book, An Inconvenient Truth. I think that kind of set a fire to a lot of things. And, shortly thereafter, I co-founded my first, if you will, climate tech business in the solar space, Solar Power Partners. That went on to become a big success. We did a lot of business there. What I've seen and learned is really there's no shortage of energy.
Yeah.
It's really only a question who can do it faster, cheaper, and greener. Just for an example, here in the Western United States, everybody knows, there's at least 100, probably many, many more large scale solar projects that would love to get built. But those utilities are oversubscribed or the interconnection's not there. There's no shortage. In California, we're easily going to meet and beat the plan of going 100% renewables over the coming years. No problem. But where there is an absolute shortage is in water. Currently, it's estimated that there's about 3 billion people worldwide living in water stress. And it's expected that number is going to increase to about 5.2 billion people by 2050. So it's a super train wreck coming. And there's very, very few solutions that can actually help.
So when you and I started in the solar industry 20 years ago, there were experiments globally around funding access for what was called the bottom of the pyramid, right? Famously, Grameen Bank was doing a lot of effort around financing technological advancement in developing countries. And we thought a lot about energy access as a poor country's problem or a poor community's problem. And that energy access, notably, it was something like, and I remember there was a statistic that like 1.2 billion people worldwide had zero access to electricity. And to your point, we've seen that number diminish, right? We've aggressively addressed that problem. Yet water access is increasing. The delta on clean water and access to it is getting worse. Is there a name for that, like that group of people or that problem generally?
There's a lot of different terms. I would say in general, from my experience, the water fuel industry is not as sophisticated and advanced as the energy industry. For the most part, it seems as if leadership in water is left over to kind of like NGOs and nonprofits and municipalities. You don't have for the most part, the big multi-billion-dollar corporations with deep balance sheets who are figuring out and going after solving the problem.
Right.
That is changing. We hope to add to that change at SkyH2O. It's also a problem that's kind of crept up on us. It's not, similar to the way climate change is kind of crept up on us. I mean, I know we've had 28 COPs and it's been aware for a long time, but I think for the majority of the population that you really got to get behind making change, for them, for the most part, it's crept up. And that's the same thing. That's the case with water. One of the very interesting dynamics to me in water is when we think about water stress, most everybody immediately just thinks about water scarcity, lack of water, which is, let's say, in most parts of Northern Africa, or maybe what's in a lot of the Southwest US or parts of Latin America, et cetera. But what's kind of newly happening is, and rapidly advancing in the developed world, the industrialized world, is water toxicity. Water toxicity was not an issue up until only a few years ago. And only last year, the EPA that oversees municipal water came out with a public study that says 45% of US American tap water is toxic. And we can get later into a lot of details, but we're currently at SkyH2O building the world's largest atmospheric water generating projects near Houston, the third largest city in America, because of water toxicity. So when you think about water challenges and stress, don't only think about the poor, unfortunate people in Africa or South America. We have that issue right here at home in the United States, as bad or worse than anywhere else.
Yeah, there's this category of water technology that I only became familiar with because you started telling me about it almost a decade ago, called atmospheric water generation, AWG. And at the time, I could find no companies that were really building anything or talking about it at scale. Can you help me understand what is atmospheric water generation and why is it only now reaching pilot and sort of project scale?
Similar to energy that you and your viewers know so well, there's a lot of different technologies in energy, right? Whether it's solar, wind, nuclear, hydro, et cetera, et cetera. In water, there's also many, many different ways to generate, prepare, and provide water. Of those various different ways, one of the newest and most innovative ways is what's referred to as atmospheric water generation, or AWG. AWG is different than any and all the other water technologies, which are mostly in different forms of reverse or forward osmosis, basically filtering water, or also distillation. Atmospheric water generation is different because our resource is the air. So all the other technologies need to have an existing body of water, like a lake, a river, an ocean, to desalinate, where in our case, the resource is the air. And air is everywhere. And that makes AWG able to have kind of game-changing business models because we can now build and locate AWG facilities at or near where the water is being used and consumed. And one of the big challenges, just like in energy, is how to get that resource from where it's being generated, along a transmission or distribution line to where it's being used.
Right.
And building infrastructure like that, just like transmission or distribution lines and energy, is highly expensive, takes a long time, very challenging. So as we can make water generating facilities at near where it's being needed, let's say like at a hospital, at some kind of mission critical facility, that's game changing.
For those who are totally unfamiliar like myself, what is the relevant composition of water in the air, and you're in a typical like Houston, which is more, I would assume, because it's more humid, it literally means that it has more water in the air. Can you give us a quick, 101 on how we should think about that?
So atmospheric water generation, similar to solar energy or wind energy, is a renewable resource. It's renewable water. Like those are renewable energy. And the resource, the natural resource required to do well is relative humidity. There's other factors too, like temperature and elevation and so forth. But the key driver is relative humidity. Just like for solar, the key driver is insulation. The better the insulation, the more, kilowatts you're going to make. Well, in the case of AWG, for the most part, the higher the relative humidity, the more water you can squeeze out of the air. Atmospheric water generation, the way it works is simple to understand, hard to do. So basically what we do is we have these large machines at SkyH2O. We're industrial scale. We call them the AWG Maximus. And almost like a vacuum cleaner, we suck in huge amounts of air. That air is then filtered. We've got a 3-level filtration setup, almost like a clean room. And what comes into the machine is essentially highly filtered, purified air that then gets compressed. So like when you look up in the sky, you see an airplane flying, that's a water stripe of compressed air. And then we take that compressed air and we run it through a device that we call a coolerator. It's basically kind of like a radiator with fins, and we lower the temperature of that water to the dew point, actually below the dew point. So when you, let's say, are enjoying a nice cold beer and the side of the glass is all filled with water, that's coming from the outside atmosphere, the water in the air.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that's essentially the resource. And we're basically moving tons of air, if you will, through the machine, and that then converts and the water comes out. And what comes out of the machine at first level is essentially purified, distilled like water. There's nothing in it. It's highly pure. And then depending on how the water is being used, it can then be used more or less like purified water for industrial purposes. I mean, just for an example, solar companies should love this because most of these solar farms have big challenges washing and cleaning panels, and they really want to have distilled like water so they don't spot and
Leave minerals.
So this fuel distilled like water through AWG is very valuable to them. But in most cases, the water is most valuable for personal consumption, which would be drinking water, water used for food and cooking, maybe, personal hygiene, brushing your teeth and so forth. That's where this water is mostly used for. And that's what the projects in Texas are designed for.
You stated that over 45% of the U.S. water is estimated to be toxic. Where are you pulling the data from, and how can we validate that? I mean, that for me is a really startling statistic. I'm just curious where the information is coming from and what are the relevant toxicity markers that we should be concerned about, and that through AWG we can eliminate.
So that's that 45% statistic is a public report. Is now a public report made by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency just last year in 2023. So I don't know if you can get more credible than that.
That I would say that's, well, some people might call EPA into question, but for the purposes of our audience and my liking, the EPA is a credible resource.
There's many different fuel toxins found in the water, from plastics to pharmaceuticals, to all kinds of different stuff. What's becoming most talked about, kind of most notorious, are the PFAS that are referred to as forever chemicals. The reason they're called forever chemicals because these are Frankenstein elements that honestly nobody has figured out yet how to eliminate. There's tons of investment currently going into industries to try to figure out how to eliminate PFAS, things like Teflon, but not even, the most sophisticated filtration systems can get them out. So they're coming out of your faucet. In the case of the Houston area, you can look this up. You'll find as many as 49 different toxins in the water.
Right.
The toxicity in the water that ultimately comes out of your tap, there's a number of fail points. So the first is the original water source. The second is the water as being processed coming out of the water treatment plant. A lot of these treatment plants are old and not effective. The third is the water going down the pipelines. Across America, most of our infrastructure is old and decrepit. There's a lot of lead pipes, a lot of rust that gets into the water. And fourth, before it comes out of your tap, it's going through your plumbing. And most people's homes or apartment buildings, they're old and cruddy. So there's just so many places for it to fail before you start drinking it.
Alex, you're not a water specialist, or were not when I first met you. To my knowledge, you don't have a doctorate or deep research background in water technology. Can you talk to me about the entrepreneurial journey or process of deciding, I'm going to now turn my attention towards water. I'm going to try to figure out how to fix it. I'm going to decide on AWG as a technology, which isn't even a category that I'm aware of at scale. And I'm going to raise money around it. Can you talk about, because that's an audacious sort of second half of your career to attack, right? I'd like to hear more about that from the perspective of an entrepreneur that I see as a very successful. You didn't need to go create SkyH2O.
Yeah.
You successfully could have at least or fully retired from the legacy that you all created with SPP, having made a big impact early in the solar industry. Talk to me about that process of evaluating and then deciding on AWG and getting a business going where you're not a scientist specifically. How did you mobilize that?
Yeah. So you know me, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've committed myself to essentially the climate solution process. SkyH is my third startup business in the climate tech space. You know me as a pioneer in solar energy with Solar Power Partners. After successfully selling that business to NRG, I turned my sights towards basically doing more broad things in the climate tech renewable energy space. I founded a group called Clean Power Group and Clean Power Advisors. And for a number of years there, we helped many, many different startup businesses in the climate tech space with strategic and financial advisory services. I've helped more than 20 different companies in the climate tech and renewables area get off the ground, most often with funding. But while doing that, over about a 3-4 year process, I kind of discovered that myself personally, I'm more an entrepreneur. I'm a doer. I like to roll up my sleeves, take responsibility, and less of an advisor, advising people how to do it. And in the 2015, 16 timeframe, the West was in kind of an epic drought. At that time, Governor Brown created a water emergency task force. And at that time, I had connected with with a key member of the Irvine family, who's been pioneers in water in the West since the West was one, essentially, who kept saying to me, Alex, you should turn your sights to water. There's so many things that need to be done. And then during this time, was introduced to a group out of Switzerland, Germany, who self-purported to have industrial scale atmospheric water generation. I thought this was great. I made a deal with them to build up that business in America. It turned out that they didn't have what they said they had. It was more kind of a vision. So it didn't work out with them. But thankfully, I have a very close, good friend at UC Berkeley, Professor Tarek Zodi. He's the head of the engineering school, chancellor professor. Kept asking me, how's my SkyH2O project coming along? I said, well, I think these guys in Europe don't really have what we need. And he said, well, why don't we just invent this ourselves? I said, I don't know how to invent things. He said, we'll put a team together. We'll get this done. I said, all right, I can throw some more money at it. And Tarek and Reinhold Ziegler and Charlie and I and a few others, we pulled our heads together, and we got to the blackboard and we invented from the ground up our own AWG. And one of the funny stories is we would meet kind of on every couple of weeks at Berkeley in a infamous conference room where back in the day Oppenheimer met for his Manhattan project.
Wow.
And we would always say we're working on the California project. So that was essentially how we came up with our own technology. Now, let me say, AWG as a technology is not necessarily new. The Germans actually even used AWG on their U-boats during the Second World War. That was one way the Wolfpack could stay, for long times out in the Atlantic, creating havoc. Only in, let's say, the last 10 years or so, as water scarcity has become a much bigger issue, has there been a newfound interest in AWG. And there's now, I would say, roundabout a dozen companies or so who are growing and taking on the AWG space alongside SkyH2O, not so dissimilar than wind 30 years ago or solar 20 years ago.
Some listeners may be familiar, and I know certainly folks like Josh Porter have done episodes recently with companies like Source. Can you talk about the varying scales and approaches to capturing water from the air, just so that listeners are familiar with kind of the breadth of how the technology is being applied?
So since most of them have experience in solar, I kind of like to make those analogies. Just like in solar, you have lots of different solar technologies that are really kind of designed optimally for different applications, different locations. That's kind of similar in AWG. Like I mentioned, there's currently about a dozen companies or so involved in AWG who've created technologies or products that are designed for kind of different types of locations and different applications, really different sizes. Most of them all are really focused on smaller units, kind of a product type solution. A lot of them, they look like kind of kitchen appliances, almost like a small refrigerator, that might make yourself 2, 3, 4 gallons of water a day. You mentioned the company Source. That's
Right.
a nice, innovative business. They're out of Arizona. They've cleverly integrated a solar panel with kind of a black box AWG unit, as far as I can tell. I'm no insider, but from the outside, that's what I see. From what I can see, it's really designed for kind of smaller or off-grid applications, where you might need to make, 10, 20, maybe even 100 gallons of water a day. SkyH2O is really on the other end of the spectrum. We're making the largest systems. Our technology has been designed from the ground up, really industrial grade for larger commercial, industrial, and government applications. Most of the projects we're working on start at about 10,000 gallons a day. And as we're designing and engineering projects, we're seeing that kind of our sweet spot is in about the 10,000 to maybe as much as 100,000 gallons a day of fresh water. That's like very, very different than obviously those who are making systems or products designed for 5 to 10 gallons.
So I had a question here: are you a threat, a potential acquisition, or a potential provider for the multi-trillion-dollar beverage industry?
All of that. We're a threat.
I mean, what do you think? Do you feel like you're going to disrupt it and somebody is going to say, like all of the water companies that came out in the 90s, do we want to acquire you so that we can, incorporate you into our product process? Do you think that's a logical sort of outcome for SkyH2O, or is your vision and mission bigger than that?
Who knows how the capital markets develop? They're very finicky. I don't understand them. What I do understand as a 30 plus year experienced business executive is how to create value. We're creating a lot of value at SkyH2O. Ultimately, how the shareholders exit out of that value, whether it's a term sale, whether it's a private equity deal, whether it's an IPO, whether it's whatever. I don't know, but what I do know is as we continue to build this, honestly, very disruptive, very valuable business with like unlimited growth potential, there's going to be there's a lot of groups who want to acquire us, and we've already had many offers.
I could imagine that you have. How quickly? Because when we were, the first question that I can remember being asked when I started selling solar to not just homeowners but commercial entities that I was partnering with you guys on was, how quickly can this be installed? Right? It starts to disrupt industry because to pull an electrical line out to a farm cost more and took longer than to install a solar array. Can you give me a sense of scale and cadence for the deployment of these systems?
Firstly, within our whole kind of value chain, from making the product to installing, et cetera, we really don't have any limitations except for capital. It's basically needs a lot of capital, but there's no rare earth materials, if you will. There's no elusive controlled components. There's no limitation on sites. Honestly, at the moment, nobody's taxing the air. No one's saying, hey, you need a whatever to be able to take some air out of the sky. So we control everything from production to our resource to our customers, which provides for a phenomenal business model. As far as rolling out, I would say the limiting factor is kind of two things. One, it's financing, but we've got a great value proposition. So I see that. Look, in the early days of solar, when we started Solar Power Partners, to get any kind of investment, we had to promise equity investors 25+%. Now solar projects, these guys are coming in at 5, 6, 7%. That's the same thing's going to happen here. AWG over the next 2, 4, 6 years can be completely proven. And then it's going to be a race to the bottom, a jump ball by the investors to come in, and the cost of capital is going to be low. So really it comes down to, in our case, land grabbing the best sites where we can make these projects. And where we do these SkyH2O station projects, we site them, almost like a Costco or a McDonald's would consider their sites. We look at demographics, we look at traffic flows, we look at economic prosperity. Obviously, we look at the water stress in the area. We look at humidity, and then we decide on a site. We've actually already to date identified more than 20 sites across Texas. We're going to be building projects, and we have a plan on building over 100 of these projects to the tune over more than $3 billion over the next 5 years.
So I'm going to come back around to my original question, but it made me think that a smart listener, perhaps yours truly, can look at this and say, post-solar, post-storage, boom, someone who's really good at originating land users and putting themselves in the middle of a deal can lock up sites and option them to companies like yours as an extension of their current development origination process. Am I wrong?
I mean, they could, but I have to admit, at SkyH2O, we've figured out in a very clever and very effective way how to get the sites and how to get the cities working on our behalf. The sites that we've so far secured, literally city planners or basically mayors have said, hey, this is the right site for you. Why don't you do it here? And we'll get behind you, help you get it done.
Makes sense. We saw that in the early days of solar as well, right? And how quickly once the city of Houston says, let's do it, can you mobilize a system?
So, as you know, in the United States and different states, different counties have different kind of permitting regimes. One of the reasons we're moving kind of first on these projects in Texas, as opposed to California, where we're at home, is permitting and constructing projects in California, literally takes almost twice as long as in, let's say, Texas. We generally, and the projects in Texas, we generally estimate about a 6-month period for pre-construction, to get all the permits and authorizations so that we're shovel ready. And then we have approximately a 12-month construction period until we're COD and can start producing water. Of course, one of the key bottlenecks is interconnection to the grid, because we need one of these SkyH2O station sites basically needs about 3 megawatts at full load. So that's not everywhere to be found and had. So yeah, there's some overlap with solar.
I love that. It's a nice way to sort of wrap up the conversation around the helping folks sort of get in their minds, if you are thinking about how could I originate this, how could I partner potentially with companies like SkyH2O, it is a very nice complement to, in particular, a municipal or any other large water consumption partner who has already gone solar, who is considering going solar, to potentially marry this technology with it on site, possibly for a beverage company that you've sold a solar array to. Yeah. How interesting. A lot of folks are going to say, this will just complicate the deal. like trying to add solar canopies because you can now see the solar. It'll just complicate the deal, make it too expensive. Do you have any thoughts for those folks?
I mean, it's water and energy goes hand in hand. We at SkyH2O invite, all kinds of professionals, strategic partners, investors to work with us to accelerate our business and our project development. I think me, I am a climate tech entrepreneur on a mission, and we're open and inviting. We aim to build this company in a very, very large, fast-growing, valuable business, and we need a lot of good people to help us make that happen. So, anybody who likes to get involved with us, help, grow a fantastic new business, new industry that works in balance with nature, please contact us. Please contact me directly. I'm incredibly accessible. I'm a CEO that's on the front lines, very accessible.
Yeah. They're also always out there, both connecting and promoting and being a thought leader around not just the water technology, but helping raise awareness for the need and the water energy nexus. We didn't talk a lot about water energy nexus, so I'll link to a bunch of resources that Alex shared with me about this whole concept of water energy nexus, because I think that's a good place for folks to start understanding what we as climate activists, essentially, what we as in some cases economic opportunists. Like I don't pretend that everyone's a climate activist that gets into solar, but we all see the opportunity to do well while doing good financially. And I think that the ability to provide clean drinking water, moving away from just the sort of the domain of nonprofits into the domain of for-profits, is one where it doesn't need to be cloaked in some sort of dirty capitalist conception. In reality, it has been limited to the halls of academia because it's, to your point earlier, it's not seen the same, despite the fact that we pump it from the ground and we distribute it across a pseudo grid. It's not seen as something that should be made profitable. It's seen as a universal good. I think that one of the beautiful things about how we're evolving in companies like SkyH2O is that we're recognizing the limitations to these resources that we have in the ground, and we got to find other ways. I had never heard of the concept of renewable water, frankly, until this conversation. Alex, as we wrap up, I want to ask, as you have developed over the last 30 years as an entrepreneur, are there any particular lessons, sort of salient takeaways, either from mentors or from your own experience, that you'd like to pass along to others who are in the throes of startup or their entrepreneurial journey right now? How would you mentor them?
I think for one's career, the most important thing is to work with purpose. That drives passion, which drives being really effective. We need to do a lot of things to clean up the world and hopefully make things right. We have kind of the trifecta upon us of man-induced climate change plus kind of relentless pollution plus biodiversity loss. So there are so many things that we have to do to get things right for the next generations. So, I would only say, find your lane, find your passion, and just work wholeheartedly at it and try to make this world a better place.
I love that you have built upon what was absolutely a foundational and pioneering business and career pivot towards climate action with Solar Power Partners by following that and innovating once again with SkyH2O. I'm sure there are others who are listening who had no idea there was a concept of renewable water or the ability to extract it from the air and serve it to our fellow humans. And they're going to want to reach out to you. What's the easiest way for them to connect?
So we got a great website with a simple URL, skyh2o.com, skyh2o.com. You can connect with us there. There's plenty of places to, send in your information. I have to admit, I get them all, RFIs, RFPs. So, our team is depicted boldly there. Everyone's email address. So you can connect with, whoever you feel is the right connection, whether it's Lawrence Impella, our marketing manager, or Terrell Jones, our head of business development.
That's great. So you've got everyone's email on the website.
You'll find us on LinkedIn. So we try to be a very transparent, very open company. We're very relationship oriented. So, if you want to contact us, please do.
So Alex, I normally will ask for a bold prediction, especially coming into a new year, but I think I want to change it a little bit and modify and say, if you as an entrepreneur have something to offer, it might be a way of thinking about a living, maybe a personal motto. And so I wonder what call to arms or personal motto you might offer to those of us who are alongside you in the climate fight.
I mean, my last thought or comment, and this is kind of my motto, which is, no excuses. Let's make it happen. A lot to do to get the world back in order on the climate front. Let's everyone do our part. I'm doing my part. Happy to collaborate with anybody and everybody. So again, no excuses. Let's make it happen.
Well, it has been such an interesting journey to unpack the story of my friend Alexander. I realized that I didn't ask most of my normal, typical interview questions with Alex. And the reason is that there's just too much to unpack. And I wanted to focus on what is AWG and why does it matter? Why does the energy water nexus need to be studied further, especially by those of us in the energy sector? And there's still so much more learning that we can do. You heard Alex and I talk about some links that he was going to share. You can go over to mysuncast.com and click on the show notes tab where I've linked all of that. It should be in the description, either on YouTube here or in the podcast player that you're listening to. Right in the description, you can click through to those notes. And you'll find all the interesting research that I did on the energy water nexus, the UC Irvine group, WEX, that is leading that effort, as well as the videos that, like Farmers to Fighter, that Alexander was talking about. I know that you're curious, and that's why you're here. So I just thank you. Thank you and honor you for your curiosity, your intellectual stimulation, and for your infinite learning status. That makes two of us. Please Leave us a rating and review on whatever podcast app you are on so that other infinite learners like you can find us, and shoot me a note, if you will. My preferred platform is LinkedIn. It should be relatively easy to find me there. You can either search Nico or SunCast or even Valence, our new newsletter that unpacks content that connects in the clean energy story. I want to thank you once again for listening, and thanks our sponsors for helping make sure that this is free for you each and every week. Learn more about them at mysuncast.com/sponsor. That's also where you can learn how to reach thousands of clean energy and climate champions just like yourself each and every week, like they do. Remember, you are what you listen to. Thanks again for showing up, Solar Warrior. It's half the battle.